Good morning, PT on Ice Daily Show. How are you? We were a little backwards there to start on Instagram. Good morning. I am Dr. Lindsay Huey, lead faculty of Extremity Management, and I'll be chatting with you today on Clinical Tuesday. Thank you for joining me a little early today than that 9 o'clock time. Today, I'm going to speak with you about completing the dopaminergic loop in extremity management. And I'll be honest that today's topic is more about dopamine than it is about extremity management, but specifically how we can use dopamine and its three main functions of the body to maximize our patient care sessions each and every time. And while this is a plug for extremity management, I really am speaking and to all individuals across the lifespan. So, all ages and stages and all body parts, and how we can really use this neurotransmitter as a productive reward center for our humans. And we really do this by architecting a consistent session structure. But before we dive into that, I just want to speak with you a little bit about some courses Mark Gallant and other faculty member Eric Chaconis have coming up. So we have a lot of live courses across the country. Our most recent course coming up is June 24th in Oklahoma, and then in Maryland, June 16th. So those are coming up and should be a blast. And then in August will be August 6th, 7th will be in Arizona. And then August 20th will be in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Come join me with the Delta crew. But again, all the way, every time I'm on here, I say all the way through November, we have open courses available across East to Midwest to West Coast. So please join us. So back to the topic at hand, um, considering dopamine. So dopamine is a really complex neuromodulator, but in general, just a little review. It has to do with pathways related to pleasure, motivation, learning, attention, mood, memory, and really so much more. And I'm going to simplify its roles um, for in just 3 ways, but I wanna point out that I was really inspired by Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist and tenured professor in the Department of Neurobiology at Stanford University School of Medicine. He is genius. If you haven't listened to any of his podcasts, Huberman Lab, I highly recommend it. But I wanna point him out because he has done over 10 episodes on dopamine, and they are 1 to 2 hours long. So I'm gonna be trying to cover some aspects of dopamine in 15 minutes or less. So appreciate that this is a cursory overview and its simplification, and that Dr. Huberman's episode 39 really inspired me for this. And that episode was called Controlling Dopamine for Motivation, Focus, and Satisfaction. And so it really inspired me to think about our patients and how we use dopamine as an influencer and regulator. Specifically, when we think about the three primary influencers of dopamine, it's a regulator of movement, mood, and motivation. So we have three main things here. As healthcare providers, it's really important that we take the time to tap into these reward pathways more intentionally. And specifically, as physical therapists listening, I believe that we can create a cyclical dopaminergic pathway each and every session if we follow a dopaminergic schedule or rhythm. And so I want to unpack that, what that means for movement, mood, and motivation for our patients. So, movement, right? How do we maximize a patient's movement? This is really our bread and butter, right? It's our job as physical therapists to get patients moving well. Movement is our medicine. And the way we do this really well and in a simplified way is to learn our patient's irritability at the eval, right? Taking a very intentional time in the subjective to learn their irritability. And then we're going to dose exercise and movements accordingly. And that's going to be based on their primary asterisks, right? The subjective and objective asterisks that elicit symptoms like that correlate to their primary complaint. And when we do this well and we respect irritability, this creates an opportunity for successful and meaningful movement. And success is different for every patient, right? It may be you help them increase motion in their knee or elbow. You reduce pain with gripping, or help the movement pattern, like climbing steps, to be easier by reducing knee pain. So maybe it became a step over step pattern that was a little bit more fluid. Or maybe you helped a CrossFit athlete move more efficiently in a lift by helping their shoulder move better, or improved running mechanics, right? The list goes on in how we can improve movement. You get the point. Whatever it is that session, you influence something for the better. This creates a dopamine spike. And whether it was through manual therapy, exercise, or coaching, you helped them move well, and you improved a particular aspect of their movement. And it looks like this, Susan, it looks like you further improved your hip flexion compared to our last session. Awesome, right? Yes, Susan's pain still is there in her hip, and it's still painful at towards that end of range, but we don't focus on this piece, right? We focus on the good news and what we improved in the movement pattern, and then we focus on where we headed. This creates another dopamine spike. And you then go on, right? You created a change in an asterisk, you checked it, you let them know that it improved, and then you curate your session that further enhances an aspect of that movement pattern, right? If it's Susan's hip flexion, we do something that makes her load that hip flexion and use it and feel confident in that hip flexion in the session. And we might do that through strengthening, stretching, a rehab EMOM. And then guess what? After you do that, you're gonna retest after this next part of the session, right? After that strengthening, stretching, rehab, EMOM. And then this is an additional opportunity for a dopamine spike. And especially when there's further improvement in the retest, right? Where you can really play that up as beneficial. And then finally, in the session, architecture, you're going to end the session with a review of a home program that maximizes and reinforces the gains in that session before the patient leaves. Could be hip flexion fusion, or it could be that we were going after hip extension that session and we did a combined P to A hip mobilization in a figure four position. So we're going to give her a figure four position to go home with, a mobilization, and we're going to tell her a specific dosage tied to an individual, to her goal, right? And we're going to remember to tie it back to an asterisk. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of being specific, right? Being specific in your plan. Right when Susan goes home and we to give her that figure four, we give her how many times a day, what it should feel like, set the expectation there, and we also maybe give her some load to follow up with thrusters. It's not do this once a day and I'll see you at next week. It's I want you to do these one-legged thrusters, 3 sets of 10, a 1-minute break every other day to work on continued access to that hip extension while also building glute and hamstring strength. And then tying that to how that's going to help her walk more on the golf course with less pain. And then letting her know not just that, that's what she's responsible for her HEP, but that next time you see her, next time I see you, Susan, we're probably going to challenge you in those thrusters. We'll probably drop the reps a little bit and add weight next time, especially if you do well with these in your session. And you're going to further build and challenge her. Let her know, like a little nugget of this is what's next. So you always mention where you're headed next visit to keep working towards a goal. This sets off another dopamine light signal, right? Lindsay helped me move better in this session. This home program will help to get me continued on my progress. And if it goes well and I'm doing this like I'm assigned to, like I know that it will help me, I believe that it's going to help me, I will progress my plan next time I see Lindsay. So this sets up another opportunity for positive expectation and then positive mood for your next session. And so that brings us to that second part. So movement. We're pretty great at helping improve movement, but we do have to do it in that framework, right? With that rhythm of retesting asterisks to really maximize on the mood. So mood is that next part. The dopamine really influences. And it's our job to set a positive mood or vibe from start to finish in our clinic. And we do this by setting a tone of purpose and by setting a tone of belonging in the clinic. My father-in-law yesterday, we were chatting at lunch and he was talked to me about the first time he came to my office for therapy when he fractured his wrist and he was in the healing stages. And he said he first pulled up and he thought, I don't belong here. I don't lift heavy weights. My office drive PT is in a CrossFit gym." And then he said he sat there for a minute in the car, and he was like, "Well, I know Lindsay, and she knows me, so I belong." And then he said he came inside, he saw me, and he was like, "Huh." And he went on to kind of take it a little philosophical, but he said, "If we are known, then we belong." He said, if I believe that I'm known, then I belong." And so that really made me think about how we can set a mood in not just celebrating patient wins, but helping patients intentionally feel like they belong each and every session. And we'll do this by that same rhythm mentioned earlier. We'll do this by checking asterisks that are important to the patient. So subjective and objective of asterisks at the start of each visit. This not only lets you know as the therapist if the plan of care that you've given is in fact working, right? Or is it flaring them up? But it also personalizes what is important to them as the patient, and that lets them know that's in your frontline importance, right? Susan comes in, she tells you her hip's feeling a little better and that she was able to play 9 more holes of golf, after her last session. And you celebrate this, right? "Susan, that is amazing, that you were able to do that. Congratulations." And then you retest, right, where she's at now, and you let her know where she's headed. And what's really neat about that is not just maybe, the tolerance to standing, right? And or maybe she had some improved motion but we've shared something that is important to the patient personally right away, right? So we have this opportunity for further rapport building, making them feel like that you know them, right? That they belong. This review of tiny wins and then sometimes even losses, right? Our patients do have flare-ups, but each and every session at the beginning it allows us to create a plan of care that's very individualized. And I think there's one part of this besides, verbally saying, "Susan, that's awesome," right? But it's eye contact, and maybe it's a high five, right? And maybe because of increased motion or that she was able to play golf for, 9 holes, where she only was able to do 3 or 4 without pain last time. Maybe it's that you listed on the whiteboard the accomplishments of your patient. MMA faculty Dustin Jones and Jeff Musgrave at Stronger Life, they ring a bell when there's a PR in strength. Whatever it is that keeps the mood high and creates this positive vibe in your clinic, maximize on it. Make it personal to the patient. It's our job to not only improve a patient's movement, it's our job to create a therapeutic and healing environment that really, again, celebrates the human as an individual, that those wins or those improvements and impairments on paper, it's really what help them improve in their life that really matters. And that matters when you show that to patients. We're then gonna further enhance the mood or end the mood of the session by summarizing the wins in the session. And then we're gonna let, again, the patient know where are we headed. And this creates a um, positive expectation, right, for where we're going. And it also facilitates locus of control because you let the patient know, here's what you're responsible for, and then here's what we're going to do together next visit. So, elevating mood leads us into that motivation piece of dopamine. So, we tap into what actually motivates and helps a patient keep coming back and keep at it, to keep at their HEP. Motivation, this last piece. We maximize patient motivation by helping them set a purpose filled mindset each and every visit. And this is from start to finish. And that brings us back to our architecture of how the session goes, right? So this is curated from that rhythm of the patient comes in, you check asterisks, something subjectively and objectively that's important to the patient and their world. In that moment, you celebrate movement wins in the beginning of the session and you reframe any losses. These then lead into a plan of care that is tailored to those wins and or losses. Excuse me. And then you do the thing, right? Whether it's manual therapy, exercise, dry needling, loading, maybe it's a mix of all of those. And then you retest and you see further gains and where you're headed. And then you end finally with a summary of what happened in that session. And again, you set expectations for where we're headed again. And so there's this loop of positivity, right? That is created of dopamine spikes, right? In movement, mood, and motivation. And it just keeps cyclically going if we architect the session like that every time. And just an example, when we think about motivation and how we could maybe squelch that in a session, right? If Susan were working on her posterior chain and we're going to have her do hip thrusters really heavy, and we say, Susan, I know you hate exercise and these hip thrusters we did today sucked, but this is going to get you back to golfing faster. We really undermine motivation and we limit dopamine effects if we allow a patient to think that this sucks, but do it anyway. Exercise in general has the ability to spike up your dopamine 2 more times its normal level. But if you have a negative mindset about it, it has the potential to have minimal to no effect. And so our words, we already know our words really matter here. If you've been to an ice course, you've heard that pretty much at every course, how we frame things. But sub that, that concluding statement like this: you PR'd your hip thruster in today's session by 20 pounds, Susan. This kind of stellar work and continuing to do your home exercise is going to get you walking on that golf course pain free, playing all 18 holes that you love in no time, that course that you love. And here are the next steps, right, at home to keep you moving along this path. In this latter example, we elevate expectation and positively frame what was done in today's session. And so dopaminergic loops have to be purposeful in our architecture and in our words and in checking in with the individual. The later exchange example that I gave reinforces a positive mood created by the PR, and that session success was that it occurred. You maximize and elevate that for the patient. And then this motivates the patient to not only want to do their HEP, but it makes them wanna come back for more because they know next session you're gonna update something or change something or challenge them in some way for the better. We need to take the time to recognize the role dopamine plays in the success of our patients' progress in physical therapy, and this happens every single session. We have a responsibility to craft sessions that produce and catalyze enhanced movement, mood, and motivation. In summary, we do this by producing a consistently organized session, one that checks in on asterisks, one that not only reviews those asterisks, but then celebrates wins. We maximize on those wins in the session. And then in HEP, we we change the HEP to match that session. And then finally, we summarize achievement and we set future expectations. This cyclical dopaminergic loop is the win. Patients need consistency, and it's our job to architect that loop. This intentional session architecture not only enhances movement, mood, and motivation, it changes patients' lives. That's why we're doing this, folks, right? We wanna serve our patients, and we wanna improve, um, their thoughtless, fearless movement. I know a lot of you are probably already architecting this dopamine loop with purpose, or some of you maybe are doing it without even knowing it. But I'd love to hear in the comments kind of your rhythm, if it differs in any way, and what you have found to really maximize those dopamine gains in the clinic. Thank you for your time today. Don't forget to use that dopamine as a powerful neuromodulator in the clinic. Cheers, everyone.